Who is the better option to be a fourth outfielder for the Mets this season? Nick Plummer or Khalil Lee? We discussed that in this latest edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to switch gears here, and I know everyone wants to hear us talk about the big names, and we will get to that. But I have been personally really excited to have this conversation with you. Nick Plummer or Khalil Lee? Okay, this is first off, the problem with this conversation is I think the two of them should be competing for the fourth outfielder job, but that's going to have to come after a trade because right now, if you look at the Mets bench, if they have an 8-man bullpen, their bench currently is going to be Guillorme, Robinson Cano, Dominic Smith, JD Davis, and Nito. I mean, that's locked in. That's not a very flexible bench. So they're going to have to like Dom is their fourth outfielder right now. And they're going to have, Canna, Marte, and, Nim will be able to play all three positions. I'm already looking at you right now. You're like, that can't possibly work, right? You got to make a move so you can open up a spot for one of these guys to be a legitimate fourth outfielder.
Yeah, that's a crazy bench. And the Mets,
three guys can't play defense. But,
no, it's an inherited situation that's very unfortunate in terms of what in the world are you going to do with Robinson Cano? We actually talked about bounce back candidates on the Just Baseball show, and unfortunately, Dom Smith, I think he can swing it, but he's like a reverse splits guy, and he doesn't have he doesn't excel on defense, so you're not really holding on to that. He's not a platoon guy you really are excited about. Whereas I would actually argue that Khalil Lee and Nick Plummer, for this team specifically, could probably offer more value because both of which are great defenders in the corner, both of which are athletic. And that really helps because the bench needs that, as you mentioned. Yeah. And having that athleticism would be huge. Starting with Khalil Lee, I think people are a little bit harsh on Khalil Lee because of a weird threw him to the fire type of debut at the big leagues. And then he goes to AAA. And then I realized why he struggled so much in the big leagues. Watching him through AAA, I don't think I've ever seen a more passive hitter in my entire life. He did not swing at all through the first half of the season. And you look at the strikeout rate, you're like, well, then why did he strike out so much? He literally didn't swing until he was behind in the count. His chase rate was 12% better than average. He was not chasing at all. It wasn't whiffing egregiously. He was just taking so many strikes. And I don't know why. If you look, he walked a ton too. As the season went on, he got more aggressive and more aggressive. And his finish to the year was spectacular. And all it really was him just being more aggressive. Over the final 50 games, Ryan, he hit 297, 466, 593 with 10 jacks. And legitimately, the only difference was being more aggressive because his issue is he is really bad against breaking balls. And that's going to hold him back a bit from being a legit everyday player. But he demolishes fastballs. And if you demolish fastballs and you ambush them in the right spots, you can still be a really successful baseball player, especially with Lee's profile. I think he could be one of the best fourth outfielders in baseball. I think he's like an average regular potentially because of the power speed combination he offers and the defense. That finish was legit. He made the tweak he needed to make. I really think this guy belongs. And again, if he's a left-handed bench bat, it's not a bad option. Nick Plummer, I don't know why he picked the Mets, dude. I have no idea because I just look at it and I'm like, of course, I would love to play for the Mets for every non-baseball reason, but for Nick Plummer, how are you going to find time here? This team is absolutely loaded, and the only reason Nick Plummer was a minor league free agent was that he was with the Cardinals, who had a even worse situation, which was they had their entire outfield filled, which we know, and then they have Lars Nootbaar, and then they have Juan Yepes, and they had no room for him. And his contract was up through the minor leagues because he was a late bloomer. And as a result, if you re-sign a guy that's a minor league free agent, you got to add him to the 40-man. Cardinals didn't have a spot for him. So he had his options, and he picked the Mets for whatever reason, which is interesting. Plummer, it clicked for him. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Money.
See, making the money gesture.
He had to get a lot of money. That's my only guess is that because
Can
Steve
you
Cohen did
give
the
a
same.
can you give a more expensive minor league deal? Is
Yes.
there a cap? You can. There you go.
Yeah, that's what they did last year with Sam McWilliams. I'm pretty sure they did the same thing with Nick
They
Plummer.
had to.
They just outbid everybody.
Which was smart because Nick Plummer is the number 10 prospect in the system. Like, and people might be like, "What? That's crazy." But no, this was a very unique situation to add a legit prospect, former first round pick in 2015, really good athlete, physical, and just he couldn't figure it out early on. Actually, no, he started well, then hit a wall. He couldn't figure it out through the higher levels. Had a big leg kick, a lot of moving parts, quieted it all down. He's super strong and realized, hey, I don't need to have all these moving parts. Let me just have a little toe tap and let my natural strength and bat speed eat. Well, it ate this year between AA and AAA. I mean, 415 on base percentage, 15 home runs, cut the K rate down to 26%, walked 15% of the time, above average runner, above average defender in the corner, could play center field in an absolute pinch. Plummer's legit. He uses the whole field. I really like this guy too as maybe an average regular if he continues to put it together, but definitely a high-end fourth outfielder. So you've got two guys here. And I wonder if one of them ends up getting dealt. Whoever doesn't win the job ends up getting dealt here because I think both of them belong on a big league roster next year.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, going back to Khalil Lee a little bit, I have been one of those that has been a little bit harsh on Khalil Lee. If there's been two prospects, throughout the offseason doing a bunch of trade shows and stuff, if there's two prospects I've been quickest to deal, it's Ronnie Mauricio and Khalil Lee. And for Khalil Lee, it's mostly because he put up those ridiculous stats in AAA, led the league in WRC plus and on base percentage. But as you said, struggles with the breaking ball. Maybe I'm still dealing with some thoughts from Lastings Millage of the past, but I see a super athletic prospect that struggles with breaking balls, and I just wonder if he's ever going to figure it out. And then you did mention that short sample size. Yes, we can't draw too much from it, but he did strike out pretty much every single at bat against the most elite pitching. So I'm a little concerned with Khalil Lee just about, could he ever be a regular? And I look at Plummer, and I just think that, you said there's that big swing adjustment that really changed things for him. I just think the upside might be a little bit higher with Plummer, but they're very similar prospects.
I totally agree. And I mean, Plummer has the first round pedigree for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think Plummer's a more pure hitter. I'd say Khalil Lee has maybe a little bit more juice. His bat speed's crazy. But Plummer, seems to be on a more upward trajectory. Whereas, Lee finished really, really strong. But yeah, I do have worries about his limitations in terms of just being able to hit day in and day out. What I do like, what does hedge some of my concern on Khalil Lee, is that he has great splits, consistent across the board. Lefties don't affect him, which is really good. That's always encouraging because you'd figure a player of his profile would actually have bad splits. So that's something I'm eager to see. I think that Plummer has a better chance to be that above average regular, but I'd say Khalil Lee, you know what you're getting right away. You can't go wrong with either. I thought both were good gets for the Mets, especially, given what they need right now. And I do wonder, I think it's going to be an open competition. It's going to be pretty fun. That'll be one of the fun storylines, I think, in spring training once it finally happens as to, who gets a look. But I think Khalil Lee could be a good trade chip. He's going to have more trade value than Plummer. And I think if you're looking to move him, the presence of Plummer could make it more justifiable.
I would say that my bottom line with this conversation is I just watched a year of Kevin Pillar. I watched the Mets trade 5 prospects in consecutive years for Keon Broxton and Jake Marisnick. I'm just happy they have some young fourth outfield options going into spring training that have that upside where, if somebody goes down, you actually have a young, fresh face that can step in there and maybe perform and exceed expectations as opposed to, Kevin Pillar, who was a nice leader, but a pretty bad at bat.
He got hit in the face and played. That was about
great story for 2 weeks. Great story.
No, I totally agree. And that's, an area where you don't need to pay more than the big league minimum for a guy. Like there's so many good prospects defensively that, are speedy that you can find. And I think the Mets just proved that. That's something that I think will start to change in Major League Baseball, which I don't know if I love it because I like to see the Kevin Pillars of the world stick around and the shelf life gets shorter and shorter for these big league vets. But for this reason. There's so much freaking talent that you can go find a Nick Plummer and plug him in as a fourth outfielder. So it definitely was a good move for him.